Let's get right into it. So, U.S. stocks rallied today as Wall Street is braced for a packed week of high-profile earnings and a delayed release of the key inflation data. This is really big because the inflation report, we haven't seen really much data on. We haven't seen much data on the jobs report due to the government shutdown. And because of this, AI stocks have really skyrocketed the economy as far as the stock market goes. And what we've seen in reality with that is tech stocks taking a huge leap in the last month or so. Right here, according to the report right here, the Dow Jones, the DJI, rose more than 1.1% due to Apple skyrocketing to 1.4% as the iPhone 17 has a very high demand in the market. So let's get into some of the reports here, some of the headlines, then we'll dive deeper into it. So yesterday, President Trump listed the top issues for the United States: rare earth minerals, fentanyl, and soybeans. And is this a sign? Let's see. In a sign that the White House is continuing to soften its trade stance. So this is really interesting right here. We'll get into that. And also, the U.S. government shutdown enters its third week, as I stated, with Democrats and Republicans still at odds over federal health care subsidies. And this is causing... What is this causing? Delay in government data to be released. This is causing a delay in government workers getting paid. President Trump is actually trying to lay off government workers, doing federal layoffs, but that was recently stopped by a federal district judge. So all these things are on the table right now as we speak right here. So let's get into the first report here that's really fascinating with Apple. Let's see. Let's check this video out from Bloomberg Television.
It does seem like the optimism that we're seeing with the trade with Apple is giving some momentum to other companies out there, certainly lifting the major indexes. What's your view on Apple hitting its first new record of the year?
Yeah, a couple things to note. One, this is old news. We've known for several weeks now that the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max have been a hit. We've known for some time now that the base level iPhone is a hit. They made major changes on that consumer model. You have the faster refresh display, the better cameras, the larger screen size, et cetera, et cetera. The Pro models, first redesign in half a decade, got that orange color, which I happen to like. They're doing very well. Second thing I'll say is I just continue to find it fascinating. I know I've been in this space for a decade now, in the financial news space, that a firm can come out, they could say, we predict that the stock price is going to XYZ, and then the stock follows, right? Stock goes up. Anyone could just shout out and say, I think the price is going to that, and see what happens, right? So these are predictions. They're not set in stone, and there's really no way to know how the stock is going to go one way or another.
Yeah, and I think this is really interesting because Apple was really struggling for a lot of the year. There were lots of reports of Apple lagging behind big companies like OpenAI, NVIDIA, because of their lack in expressing their innovation for AI in their iPhones. And what we've seen is recent reports of Apple trying to use, or more so integrate AI with Siri, because in the iPhones, lots of people were using ChatGPT and certain AI features instead of using Siri, which was really a big problem for Apple.
We don't know what the different ramifications are of different political policies and what can happen in the world at the drop of a dime, right? So it's really a coin flip to know where this stock price is going to go, or really the stock price for any company. So that's my take and 2 cents on that.
I just think it's worth pointing out, because I don't think Mark would do this himself, but oftentimes when Mark does report news that nobody knows, it does move Apple's stock price.
It does.
So it's not just the analysts who do that, but Mark's reporting often does that.
You know, I was going to come back at you, Mark, because, you know, we do have with this call out from Loop Capital that not everyone is sure that that early momentum for the iPhone justifies Apple's valuation that's out there. Shares trading at more than 32 times estimated earnings, well above their 10-year average of 22 times. You are not a financial analyst, but your reporting does move the share price. But you do know what's coming in terms of products, services, fundamentally.
Well, they all use my reporting to make their reports.
There we go.
But
I like it.
What do you say about those that are concerned about valuations? Again, you're not a
Yeah, this graph is really interesting because as you can see right here, obviously the April tariffs, almost all the stock market really collapsed. That was a huge drop for everyone. But ever since April, you know, it went up a little bit, but never hit 220 for a long time. All the way into really close to August, it finally hit 220 and then dipped again, and it's finally skyrocketing up. So this is definitely a new development that we've seen with Apple.
a financial analyst. I'm not asking you to give me a buy, sell, sell or hold or whatever, but you understand kind of what's coming at us from the company.
A little bit too much chit chat there, so let's try to see what CNBC has to say about that.
Let's go check the markets at 12 noon. In the East, it is green across the board. The NASDAQ is the big winner today. Of course, Apple is playing a big role in that. A new record high. It is nearing $4 trillion in market cap. Take a look at that. $11 to the upside, almost 5%.
Hit a new
it needs
record.
To finish the day above 259.02 for a record
That's
closing
huge.
high. I don't know if this is.
I have to say, this is a pretty big accomplishment for Apple, not only because of the new releases they've had with the new iPhone 17 and hitting the record, but really overcoming a lot of the lows. They've dealt with a lot of turbulence as far as President Trump initiating tariffs with China. Then they move all their products to India. And then President Trump announces the tariffs on India. And then they come back to the United States. Tim Cook tries to convince President Trump, gives him all these, I don't even know what exactly happened, but has these conversations and yada yada. All of a sudden, Apple's up, skyrocketing. So I have to give a lot of credit to Apple for really being innovative, being able to adapt. And that's one of the biggest things I give Apple a lot of credit compared to other companies that have really fallen off.
Been a stealth move or whatever you want to call it, but this stock seems to be back as word is that the iPhone 17 is driving the strongest smartphone sales growth for Apple since the pandemic.
All right, come on, be a little bit more excited about it. You and I have been talking about this since the summer, and I think one of the things that's important to understand, in particular with the Mag 7, is where are people in terms of positioning, sentiment, and expectations? Yes, we are getting better fundamental news regarding iPhone sales. I saw the figure. It's up about 14% relative to where we were, 17 versus the 16 on the first 10 days uptake. But I want everyone to just remember, where was Apple in 2024? Apple was negative on the year. Think about that. Where was Alphabet in 2024? It was negative on the year. And what did that do? That carried forward into 2025 this kind of muted expectation.
Okay, yeah, we understand all that. Well, let's get into the rare earths because that's something that we really need to cover. So obviously we've seen the reasoning for why Apple has skyrocketed. So let's get into this, like why President Trump is softening his stance, because we've seen this so many times. This is why there's a nickname called Taco. Trump always chickens out. Because, let me make sure this doesn't play over me here. Because I guess it's not working. Oh, whatever. So he always chickens out because China, or mainly because of the stock market and the bond market. Every time President Trump announces more tariffs, especially with China, the stock market goes down and the bond yields spike up. Now, many people will say, "Oh, the stock market's having a record-breaking year," but many people would say, "Oh, it was record-breaking when President Biden was in office for the last 4 years also." So just because there's a record-breaking stock market does not mean that is a good indicator of the economy as a whole. We have to remember that. Inflation is going to hit 3% very soon, most likely, as that report's going to be coming out later this week. And so, yeah, this is going to be really interesting. Really fascinating stuff because gold has, there's so much to get into. Gold has skyrocketed, went so high. The reserves and everything like that it's just absolutely skyrocketing. So let's get into why that's happening. So let's get into the rare earths because China is trying not to sell rare earths to America. I'm pretty sure they said they're not going to sell them due to these China. Oh, here we go. China limits rare earth exports. So let's see like why that is and what's going to happen here. Oh, actually, sorry, that's 4 days ago. I don't want to play that one. Let's play this one right here.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer are blasting China's move to curb exports of rare earth minerals, calling that action a threat to the global supply chain. Joining us right now for the latest is Michael Silver, the CEO and chairman of American Elements. That is a private U.S.-based company that distributes advanced materials, including rare earths. And Michael, thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Let's talk a little bit about what you do. You're not somebody who's actually mining for these rare earths. You are someone who is a distributor. What has the global supply chain looked like over the last recent months? What's been more difficult?
Well, we're actually manufacturers. One of the sales guys in the company said we have 1 foot in the mine and 1 foot in the cell phone. So we're processing what comes out of the mine to produce the materials that a company can use to make things. And this process actually on the export licenses began on April 4th. They restricted 7 of the rare earth materials. They just added another 5 about a week ago. And it's very different from the past because what they're doing now is restricting just the rare earths. There's a handful of them that are critical to both commercial technology as well as military technology that really account for no more than 1% of a rare earth deposit. The bulk of rare earths, cerium, lanthanum, neodymium, that make up to 90% of a deposit are unrestricted. So this is kind of unique, and it may reflect a desire to hold on to these materials themselves over the long term. And it's going to create some issues, I think, for the U.S. government. Yes.
I mean, on the one hand, it looks like they are doing this because they're trying.
So let's see why that is. Why is rare earths the big topic of conversation right here? What it makes rare earths valuable? Because you know it's the military that CNBC is saying. So let's just Google it. I mean, it's literally called rare in the name, so it has to be super popular. So let's see. The AI review says unique magnetics, luminescent and chemical properties, very valuable for vehicle motors, wind turbines, screens for smartphones, TVs, critical components for defense and medical equipment. Okay, that is interesting. So rare earths are essential part of many high-tech devices. Boom. There we go. There we go. That is the biggest reason. I mean, look what's driving the AI revolution, the stock market right now. AI. And this is one of the biggest reasons. And it's all connected here. It's really fascinating. I mean, it's in more than 200 products, from applications, hard drives, telephones, electric and hybrid vehicles, flat screens. And again, we're going to see more electric cars and with Waymo, with Tesla, we're going to see more of this in the United States and in the West for sure. So, and let's see, and this is a little bit older statistic, but 1993, so around 40 years ago, 38% of the world production came from China, 33% is from the US. So China definitely has the majority of the rare earths. So this is really interesting. And it's kind of surprising that President Trump would pick a fight with China, especially with these upper tariffs. There's a report today that he may charge 155% tariffs when China holds the cards with the highest amount of rare earth minerals. It's really fascinating. I'm not sure what the logic is there, but
trying to put pressure on the Trump administration for tariffs or for restrictions of semiconductor chips. On the other hand, if this stuff is that rare and we had a hold of it, would we be willing to share it either?
Exactly. Well, and their military applications. So you can imagine, Deng Xiaoping said decades ago, the Middle East has oil, we have rare earths. They view it as a national treasure. And the thought of somebody using their rare earths to cause them, defense issues and military issues, you can understand where they're coming from. I appreciate it. But there's a lot of things they can do, and they've done many, many very clever things in the past. And the one that we're concerned about, at least from the U.S. government standpoint, is they reduce the price of cerium and lanthanum and neodymium and praseodymium, which is the bulk of the rare earth deposit, to a very, very low number. And then they maybe even discontinue selling things like dysprosium and terbium, the ones that are used, that are very rare and are used in military applications. Because the result of that is all these new mines that are trying to be funded right now, you've got some of them listed on your screen, are going to have some real difficulties because they're going to be operating in a negative. Even Mountain Pass.
Wow. So they would be operating at a negative because of this if China were to stop selling? That's crazy.
The old mine may find itself in the negative. And that would require U.S. government subsidy to maintain that mine in operation.
That's devious.
Well, it is, but it's the reality of a national defense system. Michael, you've met with the Trump administration. What have you told them?
This came up, this potential issue. We did an advisory letter it's a confidential letter we do to our customers where we advise them of this concern. And I think the government has to be prepared to be in a position to subsidize the Mountain Pass mine in order to get the terbium, dysprosium, scandium, and yttrium, these ones that are essential for military technology, for guidance systems, for lasers, many of the technologies. And they are the rare earths. And China may just decide not to sell them at all in order to maintain their own, military footing.
We had a guest yesterday who said that part of the problem is for the heavy rare earths, we just don't have them geologically in the United States. For the rare earths that you're talking about, do we have deposits of them?
Sometimes they're referred to as the heavies. See, what China has is they have two deposits. They have the bastnasite ore in the north, which is more typical. It's very similar to what we have at Mountain Pass. But then they've got these ionic clays in the south that are loaded up with the heavies, and we don't have those ionic clays. So they're in a very, very good position on the heavies. However, Mountain Pass produces heavies. Mount Weld, which is Linus's mine in Australia, produces some heavies. And if you just apply those to military applications, which I think is what the government's going to eventually do, there's sufficient volume in the United States to support a military application. But again, what could happen is that cerium and lanthanum and neodymium could go down to a very low number, and Mountain Pass won't be able to operate.
All right, that's enough of that. So we kind of get the idea there. China really has the advantage with the heavier rare earths. That's something that I definitely need to research more, because that is really interesting how things like this are so fascinating. And because when you talk about the military and technology and how valuable these commodities are to the world powers, to the world stage, with China, the United States, Russia, all these different countries. I mean, Russia's saying they have a vaccine or medicine to cure cancer, and China's industrializing their military, industrializing their infrastructure at a very high degree using AI in a very likely much more mobilized way, because they have less guardrails for social liberties like the United States does. Excuse me. So this is really fascinating. I'm really curious to see how this continues throughout this week, and if President Trump is able to get a deal with China, because we'll see. We'll see, because China and let's transition to this, because Trump and the United States signed a deal with Australia, a rare earths deal with Australia. So this is really interesting right here. So President Trump says, quote, "I don't want them to play the rare earths game with us," basically saying we're cutting off a supply to you. Pretty much what that means. So let's look up the deal that they did, because it's interesting. So U.S. Australia rare earth deal, because this is a really fascinating agreement that is coming up here that I didn't really see coming. I mean, we've seen the United States make a deal with Ukraine for rare earth minerals in exchange for our defense of Ukraine. And people are going to say, oh, like, isn't President Trump against aid to Ukraine? Well, he changed his mind on that, just like he changed his mind with the tariffs and a bunch of other issues. So here we go. They signed a deal with Australia. Yep. So President Trump and Australia Prime Minister Anthony Albanese signed a critical minerals agreement countering China on Monday, so today. China's loomed large at the first White House summit between Trump and Albanese, with the U.S. president also backing a strategic nuclear-powered submarine deal. Wow. So a nuclear-powered submarine deal. Definitely something to pay attention to. With Australia to bolster security in the Indo-Pacific. So we're looks like President Trump and the United States is trying to negotiate with allies to try to bolster up defense and really get minerals and necessary items. So they greet each other warmly. The U.S. president expressed eerie about the past criticism of him by Australia's U.S. ambassador Kevin Rudd. All right, blah blah. Rudd in 2020 called Trump the most destructive president in history, later deleting that comment on social media. It's funny. Okay, so let's get into the details of this. So here's the agreement. The two countries will each invest $1 billion over the next 6 months into mining and processing projects, as well as set a minimum price floor for critical minerals, a move that Western miners have long sought. A White House statement on the agreement added that the investments would target deposits of critical minerals worth $53 billion. That's right, billion. Wow. Although it did not provide details on which types or locations. Of course, they're going to keep that private for probably top secret information that they don't want the public to know. And Trump's whole report is in about a year from now, we'll have so much critical minerals and rare earths that you won't know what to do with them. Okay, so that's President Trump being, his very brazen, confident self, as he likes to portray to the news and the media. That's no surprise there. So yeah, that's interesting deal. Very interesting. Now, I'm really curious if this is going to impact the conversation that Trump and China is supposed to have, because I don't know if did they make a let me think. I don't know if they made an agreement or not for a meeting. I'm not 100% sure. Early next year? Wait. This can't be true. What? Early next year? This can't. How is this? Wow. Okay, this is really fascinating. I mean, this year is flying. It's only a few months away, but that's still a pretty long ways away, honestly. So Trump said on Monday during a meeting with Albanese that he plans to meet China fairly early next year. Interesting. So I guess he probably doesn't want any major moves in the stock market from what his actions are, most likely. Okay. So yeah, he threatened a 100% tariff. Didn't he threaten a 155% tariff though? He literally just threatened a 155% tariff today. I could have sworn I saw this number. Okay, here we go. So yeah, so according to the Hindustan Times, potential 155% tariff unless Trump's warning to China over a fair deal. So he's warning of a 155% tariff on China. Yeah, but President Trump says a lot, so this could just be the same thing they said on Truth Social, where he Truth Social messaged all these things against China, then he backed out of it like it was nothing. So that we'll see what happens. I'm not going to put a lot of stock in what he says right now, 3 months out, because a lot can change. But here's some more about the tariffs, as we can see right here. So the U.S. budget deficit declined for this 125 fiscal year. That's a good thing. Declined 2%, but obviously that's because we're paying more taxes, because for those of you who don't know, when tariffs are placed, that is absolutely passed down from corporations, from importers to corporations, and then to the consumers, because the corporations have to pay to import their products. They have to pay an extra fee. So then that fee is going to get passed down through increased prices in consumer goods, which disproportionately affects low and middle income Americans over wealthy Americans. And that's why there is a deficit decrease. Now, of course, being more like physically, like a general practicing person, you want to be a physical person in that you pay what you can pay, and you what's the term, like you want to balance the budget. Most people want a balanced budget. We've seen the debt be 35, 36, 37 trillion dollars. So that's a good thing. But what's the cost? What are we actually doing with these tariffs? Because we have to pay more to cut the deficit when the government is not cutting spending. Not the best deal for Americans, in my opinion. And then here we go. Exactly. According to a Goldman Sachs study, Americans are set to pay more than half of President Trump's tariffs as companies raise prices. And this is no surprise at all because we've exactly seen this. I mean, I think last week car prices hit above 40 grand for the first time in a very, very long time. So, yeah, this is really something here. There's going to be tariffs on cabinets and vanities, which already took effect October 1st, and then October 14th on wooden products like furniture. So we're definitely seeing a lot of this take place right now. Okay, so we covered the tariffs, we covered the iPhone. Let's see what else is going on here. I had a really busy day, so I didn't get to read too much into these articles until now. So we're learning this together. We're going to learn these finance news together here. So let's see. Netflix drops. Nothing too new, really, beside Apple just completely exploding the NASDAQ, and then in turn affecting the S&P, or the Dow Jones, excuse me. The Dow Jones really skyrocketed big time today. So, yeah, Apple rose 4.8% this year to date and 11% over the last 12 months. I'm trying to see if there's more information on. Oh, let's go into government shutdown, actually. That's something I really want to get into here. So, because we didn't really get to cover that. How the government shutdown is going to affect, loans, auto loans, all that stuff. It's really fascinating here. So let's see. Oh, there I am right there. Government shutdown, finance. Let's get into this one right here. Now we know
we've had a bit of a roller coaster.
This is about mainly healthcare subsidies, and it's interesting because many people that aren't as informed in politics, they say, why can't Republicans just all agree on a deal and pass the deal? Well, with the budget, you need 60 votes. Republicans have, I believe, around a little over 50 some votes, something like that. But they don't have 60. There's not 60 Republicans in the House. Because I believe they have to pass in the House and the Senate. Yeah, so both. So you need to pass it in both. And that's not going to happen because none of them are negotiating at all.
Week on U.S.-China relations with the clear signs today that...
Let's go to this video that's more recent.
Yeah, that tells you pretty much everything you need to know. There's not going to be any resolution this week. I wouldn't even expect one next week. The White House is not engaged. It's clear to me from my conversations with Republicans on the House and Senate side that they're waiting for the White House to decide what they want to do here, whether there's anything that they want to offer to Democrats to make anything shake loose. They'll have their 11th vote. It will fail again.
And this is the third week in a row the shutdown is the second highest, I think, or the third highest in U.S. history. And yeah, it's crazy. Air traffic controllers, they're forced to work without pay. Man, that is.
And we'll just keep repeating the same thing, knocking our heads against the wall for a while.
What part of our federal government will we observe failing? Don't tell me like national parks. Okay, there's 12 people out there. I get it. But within the real day-to-day of our listeners and viewers, what will fail because of the shutdown?
Well, I think we already have seen the data releases fail. So we're already in the throes of that. The market's already had to adapt to that. But the next big one, as everybody always knows, is going through the airport and trying to travel. It's very scary to be concerned about whether or not you're going to be able to get through, whether or not the flights are going to get shut down. That's generally the main brunt of it.
Okay. But Isabel at the Gulf Stream.
Yeah, God bless the airport workers, the government ones. Man, that's That's really rough.
So I had to thank you, Delta, for a great trip down to Houston. And the answer is it was seamless, Henrietta. There was no problem. Are there really problems with TSA and air controllers now?
They're starting to register upticks in folks calling in sick from work. And the longer it goes, and as you miss those pay cycles, you'll start to see more of that. And I think that's really the story of the shutdown. It's not one big silver bullet. It's a compounding of a bunch of little things. No military pay, no federal employee pay, that starts to weigh on members and districts and starts to get painful. And we're going to need to be shut down for probably another 2 weeks before we get there.
You said that in your note that polling shows that Republicans are bearing the brunt of the blame, but most of their ads are actually targeted towards the Democrats, and I've seen some of them. Where do you see the breakdown in messaging is? Why isn't one party more effective than the other when it comes to the blame game?
Now, to me, it's pretty obvious because when you have a party, and this is just me kind of looking from an independent lens, when you look at the Democrat and Republicans control the House and the Senate and the presidency. And when you go back to 2018 or 2014, even Trump himself said that President Obama should be at fault for the government shutdown because he's the president. Now, President Trump's the president, and he not only has the power in the White House, but he has it in the Senate and the House of Representatives. And there's no funding for the government. And what that shows is that more likely than not, they're not willing to negotiate or change terms to the deal due to what Democrats want, which is subsidies for healthcare. And what Republicans are saying is they don't want these subsidies because they are for illegal or undocumented immigrants, illegal aliens, whichever term you want to choose. That's what they're for. And that's why Republicans are saying, no, we don't want taxpayer dollars for this funding. But then undocumented immigrants pay a lot of taxes. They pay over $100 billion a year in government revenue. So shouldn't they deserve health care? So this argument and this debate has been going on between the Republican and Democratic Party really for many, many years. And now it's really finally coming away from the kitchen table, from families and politics and the discussion into the House of Representatives and in the Senate, and really affecting our economy and Americans.
Yeah, I asked staff across the aisle, both sides, about this last week on Capitol Hill, and Republicans are a little bit split. There's some who think that none of this matters. Voters are totally disengaged, and therefore it's not a big deal. The president can keep tweeting, AI images if he wants to, and it doesn't move the needle. Then there are others who are saying, look, when I go back to my district in Alabama or wherever, they see that the president controls the White House, Republicans control the House and the Senate. It's difficult to then have to layer on, but we need 60 votes in the Senate, and then on the Democratic side, they're just waiting it out. They think that they're winning as well.
Henrietta, one final question here to get the week started. It's October. How many people, what's the level of Henrietta Trey's radar on retirement of representatives and senators? Are we going to see a wave of people retire?
We already have seen the
Yeah, that's wild.
Announcements come. They're from all over as well. Some from farming states. I think that the next round of elections, this midterm cycle, is going to be really telling. Everybody's sort of already in 2028, even on Capitol Hill, which is really fascinating. The main story is J.D. Vance will be, deemed to be the runner-up and the follower to President Trump. Who are the Democrats going to pick? We focus on that a lot more in conversation than even the midterms. It's kind of interesting to see that we just move ahead to that. Yeah, that tells you pretty much.
Yeah, this is really interesting because I think we're going to see with the midterms, from what I see, Democrats are going to gain a lot of seats due to this because this is really going to hurt the Republican Party because they're the ones in power. So therefore, many Americans are going to hold them responsibly for the budget, for the economy, and et cetera, much more. So I think that's a really big deal that we're going to really look into this week as far as what's going to happen. Let's see. So we got, let's see what they're talking about live. If there's anything interesting. Usually after 6 p.m. Eastern time, it's nothing too important really going on, but let's see if there's anything breaking or anything like that.
Stewardship with the planet, but that
okay,
humanity
actually,
over time has...
Never mind. It says till 6 p.m. Eastern time. So yeah, it's not live right now. So let's check out videos. Let's see if they got anything else going on here. While that's loading, check Yahoo Finance. Any new updated headlines? We covered the deal. We covered the iPhone. Bitcoin leaps back to 11,000 as crypto stabilizes after a huge sell-off. Wow, interesting. Government shutdown. We are covering that. Obviously, I don't want to minimize what's going on there. Let's see this if there's any updated stuff with this video here.
Bloomberg News Now, I'm Amy Morris. There it is, your closing bell for this Monday on Wall Street, where a strong earnings season and easing trade tensions helped push stocks higher. We bring you those closing numbers each day here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 gained 71 points. NASDAQ gained 311 points. The Dow gained 516 points. The 10-year Treasury yield at 3.98%. The 2-year yield at 3.45%. An appeals court will allow, for now, President Trump to deploy troops to Portland, Oregon, to counter protests against his immigration crackdown. The divided court in San Francisco lifted an order that blocked the deployment of troops to Portland. Amazon Web Services says issues continue to...
So just covering headlines, so not really anything detailed. Let's see what Senator Kelly talks about here in this segment on CBS
House Speaker Mike
News.
Johnson spoke on Capitol Hill recently, just moments ago, in fact, and he's, once again, blaming Democrats for the government shutdown that has now reached its 20th day. House lawmakers are still on recess while the Senate returns to the Hill today. Meanwhile, President Trump is set to meet with Senate Republicans tomorrow, but at this moment, Congress is at an impasse.
We should be able to wrap this up this week if they will sit down and have a negotiation with us. The president has spent 1 hour negotiating this issue with leadership in Congress. That's it, 1 hour. They need to get in the room and stay in the room until we can hash this out.
This is absolutely, totally ridiculous to sit here and say we're afraid people.
Yeah, this is just, never mind. They're just talking. Okay, I think we'll end the show on that note. I gotta get going soon. Thank you all so much for watching. Really appreciate it. It's been a interesting